Tonight on YCN News Vermont Wrap, we'll take a look at some of the top news stories from the week. I'll also share some thoughts on an editorial penned in part by Vermont Department of Public Safety Commissioner Tom Anderson. We'll also check in with Gun Owners of Vermont President Eddie Cutler for an after-action review on the signing into law of Senate Bill 55. All this when YCN News Vermont Wrap returns. Prosecutors have dismissed the four most serious charges against 18-year-old Jack Sawyer, the teenager who stands accused of plotting to shoot up his former Vermont high school. A ruling by the state Supreme Court has made prosecution against Sawyer untenable. That's according to Rutland County State's Attorney Rose Kennedy. The state was seeking to dismiss attempted murder and aggravated assault with weapons charges. Kennedy indicated that the state planned to proceed with two lesser charges, which include criminal threatening and carrying a dangerous weapon. Sawyer, of course, pleaded not guilty to all charges. He'd been held without bail following his arrest on February 15th, one day after the Parkland, Florida shooting at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School that left 17 people dead. Last week, the judge in Sawyer's case set his bail at $100,000. Sawyer is alleged to have kept a diary which he titled, quote, "The Journal of an Active Shooter." It was in that journal that he detailed plans for a shooting at the Fairhaven Union High School, stating that his goal was to kill more people than in any other school shooting. Upon learning of the case, Governor Phil Scott indicated he was open to enacting restrictions on firearms and related accessories, which you may recall was hastily drafted and signed into law on April 11th under the auspices of Senate Bill 55. The move established the first significant restrictions on gun ownership in Vermont history. Sawyer's defense team contended that he hadn't taken any concrete steps towards committing any crime that would justify those charges under current state law. While Sawyer had moved from Maine back to Poultney and had bought a shotgun and ammunition as part of his planning, he had not visited his former high school or even visited the town in which the high school is located. The Vermont State Supreme Court ruled that, quote, "preparation alone did not prove an attempt at aggravated murder, so he could not be kept in jail without bail." Governor Scott, meanwhile, urged lawmakers to close loopholes related to the law of attempt and establish a domestic terrorism statute. The changes would not impact Sawyer, however, as they could not be applied retroactively to his case. And just a few days ago, the sycophants of the so-called Republican governor dutifully did just as they were told. Midweek, the Vermont House approved a domestic terrorism bill in which a person could be charged with domestic terrorism for engaging in or taking substantial steps to kill or injure multiple people or threatening the population with mass destruction, killing, and kidnapping. That felony-level crime carries a maximum sentence of 20 years in a state prison. The domestic terrorism bill is heading back to the Senate. If passed, it will then go to Scott's desk for a signature. Getting tough on criminal and antisocial behavior may be important life skills to teach your children, but some Vermont lawmakers feel that that lesson is best left out of the school systems. An amended bill passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee this past week could result in the virtual elimination of detentions, suspensions, and expulsions, as public and independent schools are pressured to dramatically decrease disciplinary measures that some feel are disproportionately targeting minorities. Instead, the amendment suggests community and student-led remediations to disciplinary problems. With the latest proposal of amendment to House Bill 675, schools could be pressured to avoid imposing what are considered necessary consequences on troubled kids. On or before July 1st of 2019, the Agency of Education will issue guidance to all school boards and approved independent schools for implementing, quote, restorative justice policies that decrease the use of the measures that are considered exclusionary discipline tactics. If approved, public and independent schools in Vermont could adopt this restorative justice approach to student discipline beginning with the 2020 school year. The language will also say schools must not issue disciplinary measures in a way that, quote, target students based on race, ethnicity, gender, family income level, sexual orientation, immigration status, or disability status. The changes could leave troubled kids in schools and classrooms to continue to disrupt or threaten the safety of their peers and rendering teachers powerless to curb classroom disruptions or address classroom safety. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'll be joined by Eddie Cutler, the president of this pro-Second Amendment lobbying group, Gun Owners of Vermont. We're going to get an update on the push to get Governor Scott's package of anti-gun laws in front of an unbiased court. You're watching YCN Vermont News Wrap. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Vermont News Wrap. Joining me from Westminster is the president of Gun Owners of Vermont, Eddie Cutler, who is the face of working tirelessly to advocate for Second Amendment rights. Eddie, great to have you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Keith. It's good to be back with you again.
Now, you and I have had extensive conversations on the radio programming. It seems as though there's not a lot of talk about Senate Bill 55 as of right now. A lot of people, well, you know what? It's a done deal. They've forgotten about it, but not you and not the Second Amendment advocates in Vermont. What's going on right now with Senate Bill 55? Now that it's been signed into law, there is an effort to challenge this legally. What's the status on this currently?
Well, the status is the lawyers have got it. They've already filed the papers. And right now it's between the lawyers and the courts. I think they're going for a stay. And other than that, we're just going to have to wait until we get into the courtroom itself. But we are challenging the law.
Are you feeling pretty confident about the fact that it wouldn't pass muster legally?
Oh, yeah. This thing will be overturned rather rapidly. We have a lot of good constitutional issues. The lawyers are going to be dealing with that. I really can't say exactly what's going on, but everything is going to be a constitutional challenge. We're taking it to the Supreme Court. And the only thing I can say is we'll just see what happens.
So, for people, and believe it or not, there's still people out there that aren't familiar with exactly what Senate Bill 55 encompassed. What exactly did the legislation signed into law by Governor Scott put into effect in the Green Mountain State?
Well, actually, there's a number of things. Universal background checks, which we find the worst part of it, because without registration, it won't work. And if they register it, they're going to be confiscating next. Other parts of it, you cannot buy a firearm till you're 21 years of age, except if you take a hunter safety course. Between 18 and 21, just to find a place that gets a hunter safety course. Most fish and wildlife clubs, fish and game clubs, do it once or twice a year. So let's say you need to protect yourself against a bear right now, and you don't have a safety course in your area for the next 5 months, you're going to be running around defenseless or having to have somebody else come by to help you take care of it. It's a pretty bad system.
On the 12th of May, you're burying the governor that is really responsible for the flip from a constitutional conservative Republican state over to what has really become a liberal progressive cesspool. There's really no other way to put it. When you think about gun laws, you think about gun restrictions, you don't think about Vermont. Is this something that you think realistically in the next couple of years you can regain that lost ground? Because this is a major constitutional issue, absolutely, there's no question about it. But I think more importantly, what this is doing now is it setting a tone in the state of Vermont that you're open for sweeping progressive reforms?
Absolutely not. We're going to fight this tooth and nail. I personally blame our wonderful governor for this. If he hadn't opened his mouth and said this is the kind of things we need, these bills would have never seen the light of day. We are working right now on the court case, plus we're going to be targeting a number of legislators, and the legislators we're targeting are going to be easy pickings, some not so, but once we get the right people in, we're also going to be looking for fight back the reforms that they did, and we're going to go back to being Vermont again.
Now, the logical question would be, Eddie, at this point, you're coming up with another gubernatorial race. Phil Scott, certainly a lot of people that he angered by signing these contentious pieces of legislation into law. Are there enough people that are turned off by Scott to swing the vote here? And who are the viable candidates that you're looking at right now?
I think Scott can be beaten. Everybody's mad at him as far as the Article 16 two-way community. He's also managed to make a number of other people mad. Who is going to be going up against him? We're not 100% sure yet. We're looking at 4 people right now that will be running. and we're going to be contacting them and seeing what goes on with them and where they're going to stand. And whoever gets the best is going to get our endorsement. Probably every 2A person in the state will go for it. So we'll be seeing primaries, and we're actually also looking at a couple of Democrat and progressives. So,
Eddie, we're going to have to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to rejoin Eddie Cutler, president of Gun Owners of Vermont. You're watching YCN Vermont News Wrap. Welcome back to Vermont News Wrap. We're chatting with Eddie Cutler. He's the president of Gun Owners of Vermont, joining me in Westminster, Vermont. Eddie, one of the big questions, the precipitating factor with this anti-gun legislation in the state, of course, was an 18-year-old who had made detailed plans to shoot up his high school, and we're not going to do him the courtesy of mentioning his name. The big question here is now the state Supreme Court had ruled that he could not be held without bail. Now it's going as far as the state attorney potentially dropping charges against him. Is there a concern that the person who committed the act that precipitated, that really all of this gun legislation was hinged on, is now potentially going to walk free with no charges?
I'm not sure if he's going to walk free. He might be punished. Personally, he did nothing except threaten. And there's currently bills in the State House right now that is making it legal to threaten people, which is a pretty bad thing, because what they're saying is if you have the motive opportunity and you tell somebody you're going to do something with more than two people, you get arrested on a felony charge. This is Thought Police 1984 stuff. Lots of people get mad. Lots of people argue with other people, and their idea of motive and opportunity is if you have a firearm and ammunition. It's gotten to a point of ridiculous. So this 18-year-old, this plot to shoot up a school is uncovered. Governor Scott says, I can't possibly live with myself if something were to happen and I didn't act. Liberal progressives in the state see this as an opportunity to now enact sweeping gun reform, which they do. What aspect of the laws signed in by Governor Scott would have thwarted, prevented, or in any way stopped the plot to shoot up that high school? Absolutely none of them. He was of a legal age. He only bought a Mossberg 500 shotgun with 20 rounds of ammunition. The universal background checks wouldn't have done it because he went through a background check. The ban on 18 to 20-year-olds wouldn't have meant much because you can buy, at the time, a shotgun or a long gun rifle at 18. There's nothing in that bill that they passed that would have prevented anything like this. What we actually are trying to advocate for is armed school personnel. And I know you know about this stuff, but the only way to really stop something like this is to have teachers and janitors, whoever, who want to take a good self-defense course and just go for it. You never know. And actually, very few shootings have happened in schools. It's probably the lowest firearms crime rate in the country is actually from school shootings. Mostly it's gangbangers and stuff like that in major cities. Nobody in this state has ever been killed by a high-capacity magazine, an AR-15, or anything along those lines.
But Eddie, you know as well as I do, they look scary, and that's the whole thing. The bottom line is this. Currently in the state of Vermont, you're seeing sweeping draconian gun legislation. You're seeing bail systems which are allowing criminals to walk free. You're seeing an initiative to push restorative justice programs in the school systems. And somebody who was really ultimately responsible for committing an act which swept in gun control in the state of Vermont is virtually going to walk free. Sounds like we've got a lot of things to talk about, Eddie, and we're going to do that. Eddie Cutler, president of Gun Owners of Vermont, I want to thank you so much for joining me on YCN Vermont News Wrap. Take care of yourself, and God bless, and keep up that good fight.
Okay, thank you, Keith, and it's good to talk to you again.
Thank you, sir. When we return, a few thoughts on an op-ed that ran earlier in the week, penned in part by Tom Anderson, Vermont's commissioner for the Department of Public Safety. In a rush to appease the dope smokers on both sides of the aisle, Governor Phil Scott put the cart before the horse. We'll be right back after this. As I reported earlier in the broadcast, Vermont Senate Judiciary Committee rejected a bill on Wednesday that would have permitted police to use a roadside saliva test to detect marijuana intoxication in individuals suspected of driving under the influence of the drug on Vermont roadways. Now, members of that Judiciary Committee rejected that bill 4-1 for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons expressed by Republican Senator Joe Benning because the test was, air fingers, quote, inherently unfair, due to there being no numerical threshold to determine actual intoxication, as is possible in a blood alcohol screen, which requires a warrant. The saliva test can be administered roadside and do not require such a warrant. In an op-ed that appeared in the state of Vermont's Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets website, Department of Public Safety Commissioner Tom Anderson, along with the president of the Vermont Chiefs of Police Association and the president of the Vermont Sheriff's Association, expressed concern that Vermont, quote, lacks a good mechanism for testing motorists who drive under the influence of marijuana, opioids, and other impairing drugs. The op-ed went on to say that Governor Scott, quote, has made it clear that highway safety is a critical component of marijuana legalization. Now, it bears mentioning that on July 1st, Vermont stands to become the 9th state in the union to step in the colossal pile of crap known as recognizing marijuana, the gateway drug, as legal for recreational purposes. That's right, the state that has long wailed and lamented and gnashed its teeth due to the air fingers, quote, opioid crisis will make it permissible for stoners to engage in recreational drug use, with absolutely no means of testing drivers who law enforcement know full well are driving around the state's highways and byways stoned out of their gourds. So I want to be the first to congratulate Governor Scott for pulling yet another fast one on Vermont voters. By appealing to the dope-smoking, unwashed masses of the Green Mountain State, Scott has sought to curry favor with Democrats, progressives, and the low-information, one-topic voters who have lobbied for the right to legally and openly fry their frontal lobes. Another round of congratulatory sentiments must go out to the governor for putting the proverbial cart well before the horse. Wouldn't it make sense, Governor Scott, to have required the legislative bodies of the state to address all of the known ripple effects of pot legalization well before the bill to legalize was signed into law? The last time I checked, you don't build your house first, then worry about the lot size, zoning restrictions, water and septic systems and foundation once the structure's been completed. Well, perhaps in the twisted logic of a rhino, in the mind of a lawmaker that lacks one single iota of critical thinking skills or a critical analytical framework, the process by which Scott ushered dope legalization into the Green Mountain State makes sense. But for the rest of us, this hurried attempt to gain bipartisan support for a re-election bid is seen exactly for what it is. Just how ill-conceived is this initiative? Well, first off, the voters of the state had no say in this measure. It was done entirely through a legislative means and not through ballot initiatives. Nothing says we're your leaders and we know better than you than to enact sweeping changes to public safety laws without putting it out to the voters. And to make matters worse, in a state that's in a fiscal crisis of nightmare proportions, the state didn't even have the foresight to set up a state structure for the sale and taxation of the drug. If there's at least one positive thing from the other 8 states that have legalized marijuana, besides, of course, an increase in the number of urine screens that are popping hot, they're at least making an effort to solve some of the fiscal issues. Not that it makes the act of legalizing pot any more morally or ethically correct. So here's the bottom line, and my prediction. The rate of heroin, fentanyl, and other opioid abuse will rise as greater quantities will make their way into the state undetected. Remember, legalized recreational pot means that law enforcement officials will no longer be using its detection or presence as grounds for a search. Further, the direct, secondary, and tertiary costs associated to the state will explode as dependence on government-funded and run healthcare will be needed to provide the medical services to the holy host of health issues that come with chronic marijuana use. Further, the rate of motor vehicle crashes will rise drastically, just as we've seen in states that have already made this colossal mistake. Rising also will be the number of people getting mangled in motor vehicle wrecks caused by these stoners and the burden that's put on taxpayers to fork over cash for medical costs associated with patching these people up. Oh yeah, but by the way, guns are bad and they kill people, so we gotta ban those. That's going to do it for this week's edition of YCN News Vermont Wrap. Be sure to check out the YCN website at ycnnow.com, where we archive all of our programs. Emails are always welcome, good, bad, or indifferent. Please keep that feedback coming in. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at RealKeithHanson. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for watching, and God bless.